Welcome to the Ian Bousfield Experience. I'm glad you're here. This series of podcasts are just things that come up in my mind when I'm thinking about playing, when I'm thinking about teaching, and general thoughts about music. There are some things here that I hope you'll find really useful. And don't forget, if you've got any comments or if there's anything you want to discuss further, go to ianbousfield.com. I'd like to talk to you about my personal experience of dealing with nerves. And I'd like to stress the fact that I'm talking about my personal experience. I don't claim to be an authority on this, although I've spent my life studying it from a personal perspective and have talked to many others. I think the first thing that's really important to say is there is no right and no wrong in this, because we're all different. And we all experience life and performance differently. We all come from different personal backgrounds, we've had different upbringings, and we all see life slightly differently. So I want to talk to you very personally about this, and maybe some of what I'm saying might ring some bells with you and it might help. I hope it does. I hope a few of my words can make life easier for some people. But it's by no means meant to be a guide. And it's by no means meant to be the definitive version. But like you, I am searching for improvement in every single regard as a musician, as a trombonist, and as a human being. Why not say that? You know, I noticed when I was in my early 20s that I felt it was a waste of time me practicing for solo concerts. I had this ritual where I used to start preparing for a solo concert 2 weeks before, learning a new piece or whatever. Over the years, I've had to revise that somewhat, because you can't always learn something new in 2 weeks. And then I'd give the performance, and although the performance would have quite a lot of spirit, I felt, well, what was the point of me practicing for 2 weeks? Because in the end, the performance was pretty much what I'd done the first time I tried it through, because I'd been so shaken up by the experience, by the nerves, that I was back to square one, basically. Part of it, I think, certainly for me in my 20s, was the pressure of being me. I know that sounds incredibly self-indulgent, and that's probably part of the problem. But I was first trombone in the London Symphony when I was very young, and I was aware of the expectations on my shoulders. People were sort of talking me up, and I never felt I was as good as people said I was. That might surprise a few people. But I felt the pressure to deliver and the pressure of stepping in the footsteps of the people who had gone before me. And nerves affected me in a strange way. I may not strike you as someone who's lacking in confidence. And you'd be right. I'm not. I believe in what I can do. I believe in my abilities. But for some reason, right in my very core, something trembles. And I'm not sure what it is, because I'm confident, I'm looking forward to it, I love it. But it may be a form of overexcitement. I get very excited about things in life. Now, at this point, I'd like to say, it's called stage fright. I'm not scared. I'm really not scared. I love the danger aspect of it, a bit like mountaineering. I love standing on a stage and thinking, oh, this is dangerous, and I like it. And I think if you're not a little bit attracted to performance from that aspect, I think, you're going to find things tough. I love the risk element. I love the danger element of it. But it's not fear. I've experienced that. I have experienced pure, blind terror. And I can explain to you when. It was in 2003, and I remember doing Berg 3 pieces in the Musikverein with Bernhard Haitink and the Vienna Philharmonic. And for those of you who don't know, Berg Three Pieces does not have a very pleasant opening. It starts with a series of very high E flats on the trombone, pianissimo, and there's nothing else happening. So, and the note doesn't change, so if you miss one of them, everyone's going to notice. And I'd already done it a lot of times, but this was a big deal. Actually, that's not fair. It was a big deal when I did it 16 times with Pierre Boulez as well. But for some reason, the first time I'd done it in Vienna, and I hadn't been there long, I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning on the day of the concert with my heart going and breathing because today was the day. It was coming. It was going to happen. And that was terror. And in many ways, terror like that is not a bad thing. Hear me out on this. Because it was over 12 hours before the concert and I had a chance to talk to myself and sort of help try and calm myself down a little bit. And something that's beyond my pay grade as a psychiatrist that happened to me so often happens is I'm sitting there on the concert thinking, oh, here we go, this is, oh no, and your heart's do, 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 do. And then about 10 seconds before I have to play in the concert, everything slows down, everything's calm, and something inside me says, let's do this. Bang! And there it was. And no matter how many times, that's an experience that's happened to me many times, and no matter how many times after the concert you say, what on earth were you worrying about? And everyone's going, wow, that was fantastic, don't know how you do it, it's incredible. It never seemed to get any easier. I played Brahms' First Symphony, the chorale from Brahms, over 50 times. And I never missed it once. But I always thought I was going to. Now, let's just look at this. This is my experience of it. Now, you know, have you seen those funny videos of cats where you put a cucumber next to them and they fly in the air in terror because there's part of a cat's psyche that thinks it's a snake. Indoor cats that have never seen a snake think it's a bloody snake. Work that out. Have you ever had the experience of walking through a wood and there's a branch or a twig in the path and your eyes are automatically drawn to it? Your mind says to you, is that a snake? Subconsciously. But of course it's not. You look down, it's a twig, it's a branch, it's not a snake. So that's us being unreasonably frightened, isn't it? Or is it? Imagine it was the other way round. Imagine we were walking through the woods and there was a snake in front of us and our brain said it was a twig or a branch. We wouldn't have evolved this far by now, would we? We'd have been gone. These fear mechanisms within us are designed to protect us. So the next time you get frightened, thank your body, thank yourself for pointing out, hey, there's something coming up next week. You'd better be careful. Make sure you get your head straight, make sure you've practiced, because that's potentially quite dangerous. Now, of course, fear protects to a certain point, at which point it starts doing damage. And knowing where that point is within all of us is a very difficult thing to do. So that's dealing with the Berg Three Pieces, with the terror. So I know what terror is. And that hasn't happened to me very much in my life. It has happened. And I wish to stand here with the First Trombone Players Union. I can tell you quite categorically it's much easier to play solos than it is to sit in an orchestra. When you play solos, when you're playing a concerto, it's your dynamic, your tempo, whenever you feel like it. When you play in an orchestra, as we know, as brass players, we don't have an awful lot of exposed stuff to do, but when we do it, It's really important, and it's not your time, it's somebody else's time, somebody else's dynamic, and they expect something of you as well, as you do. So that's a little side issue, but I must say I do find solo playing much easier than sitting in an orchestra. You know, when I was a kid, I was told, if you get nervous, just take a few good breaths. Didn't work for me. I took lots of good breaths, and they were shaking. It didn't help. There are some people who swear by it. Well, all I can say is their case of nerves must be a bit milder than mine. I wish a few good breaths would fix my nerves. But listen, hey, maybe there's something about that I don't understand. If any of you out there think, well, there's a book about this or whatever that might help me, tell me about it. I'm always looking for solutions, in my own playing and also with my own students. Here are some of the things that I think help. First of all, be careful how you speak about others. And I'm talking to myself here, not just to you. Be careful how you speak about others, because if you spend your life criticizing others, you're up next. And you're worried about what they might think about you. Now, here are the things that I would say. I talk often to students about this. They say, they're scared, having trouble with anxiety, whatever. And the first thing that everybody says is, get the experience, do a lot of performances. Now, if someone is falling to pieces and really having a bad experience, just repeating that time after time after time after time is more likely just to mentally scar you. Although I understand the reasoning in it, although I understand, if you practice performing, but for some people, they just practice having very bad experiences. So this is what I say to myself, and this is what I say to my students. First of all, if you can't play the piece or the repertoire for an audition that you're about to do, don't be surprised if you get scared. Sounds logical, doesn't it? It sounds obvious, but we don't often think that. Well, if you are only getting one passage right, if you're going to do Bolero in an audition and you only get it right one time out of 3, the odds are not great in an audition. So that's could make you a little bit scared, and with reason. So if you can't do something, forgive yourself for being scared, or don't do the audition if you can't play it. And I don't mean this sort of false modesty. Oh, I'm terrible. I can't play anything. Oh, I'm just so bad. No, come on. Have a serious chat with yourself. Look at your basic technique. Make sure you've done everything you can to make your basic technique as solid as you can. And if you've done everything you can, go to your teacher and say, hey, I can't do this. What do I need to do? What's the problem? You might not in every case like the answer you get, but you have to make your playing as solid as possible. And then you've done everything you can. Performance is not a spontaneous event. It's choreographed. The performance you do on the stage is the same one you do in your practice room. The same breathing, the same body language, the same choreography that you use to show the audience the meaning of a phrase or the emotion of a passage. Everything is planned out. There is no spontaneity on the stage. I'm being reactionary. If you're feeling really solid and you want to try something on a platform, you're feeling supremely confident, do it. But if we leave performance for something that happens on a stage, we don't get enough time to practice. You have to practice performing. So that when you go onto a platform, within reason, what you're doing is simply repeating what you do in the practice room. I never practice, I only perform, is of course a saying that we all use and all teachers work on with their students. The old English saying was, You perform as you practice. So looking at it the other way around, if you're not focused, if you're not concentrating when you're practicing, don't expect not to get nervous when you finally have to concentrate when you come to perform. And along those lines, and very much related to nerves, a student recently asked me a very good question. What is your thought process? What's my thought process when I'm performing? What's my mind actually doing? And I had to stop and think for a minute. And I said, well, it's concentrating on the story. It's focusing on the storyline that I want the listener to hear. And I realize, when I'm conducting, I never get nervous. I mean, for a start, that's because conducting works on a very different principle to how instrumentalists perform. So much of the work as a conductor is done in the study room. There's a parallel with the practice room, of course. But in the rehearsals, you're preparing the ground for what you want to happen in the concert. Whereas as an instrumentalist, everything is building up to that one moment of delivering, and it's all down to you. Whereas what I find with conducting is you can prepare the ground much more readily, and it's the performers on the stage who are actually doing it, if we're being honest about it. But I don't get nervous when I conduct. And I realize it's because I have enormous obligations. It's not about me. There was a famous sports psychiatrist who worked on soccer players who got what they call the yips, got scared about taking penalties. And the psychiatrist said, the first thing I try and impress on them with nerves is a very great selfish act. Now, I don't want to get anyone feeling guilty for being nervous, but stop thinking about you. It's not about you. You have an obligation to the team. There's a ball, kick the ball, And I think when I'm conducting, it's much more obvious to me, much more clear that I have an obligation, first of all, to the composer. I have to get the intentions, the wishes of the composer off the page into the hall and into the consciousness of the listener. And I also have a massive obligation to the performers on the stage. They need me. As a conductor, you are occasionally needed. And they need me to hold things together, to help them. And that I discovered is very much innately what I do as a performer when I'm playing the trombone. If you leave performing to the minute you're on the stage, your brain will do all kinds of things to fill that vacuum. I should be thinking about this and doing this, and oh goodness me, what about this? And all of a sudden your brain is going into overdrive and you can't think about the most important things. Now, the next question is, how do we create that story? Because if you walk onto a platform and say, hey, stop feeling sorry for yourself, I've got a story to tell. I've got the intentions of the composer. I've got the meaning of this piece to show to the people who I'm listening. It's then not about me. It's taking the pressure away from me and saying, well, I'm just what they call a conduit. It passes through me. It takes the pressure off quite considerably. And in actual fact, it's how it should be. Now, how do we create the story of the piece of music? And I think, and we're getting dangerously close to one of my most hated words, interpretation, because in the majority of cases, there is not an awful lot to interpret from what's written on the page. We need to understand. If you feel brave enough in, let's say, Mahler's Third Symphony, where Mahler's written a series of accents, ding dong, ding dong, dong, ding, and you decide to play da 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 da, you're almost putting yourself above the composer in this regard. And I personally do not consider myself as a musician above Gustav Mahler in any way, shape or form. And I don't think any right-minded person would. So we have to understand what those accents mean. What is behind what is written on the page? We cannot change what is written on the page. The only reason, quite legitimately, to change what's written on the page is it's, I can't play what's written on the page, so I have to get around it somehow. And you know what, if anyone says that to me, good luck to you, mate. We all do it. But let's not pass that off as my feeling, my interpretation, what I think. As soon as we involve the I believe, I think, I like, you're piling the pressure on pretty badly. It's about the composer. So we create, the markings on the page are there to help us discover and in some cases to create our own story of the piece, the narrative of the piece. And this helps very much with nerves because you have a job to do. You know what you want to do. And so actually to answer my student's question, it was a very interesting question. It's not about verbal thought processes. We all create storylines in a different way. I create them with pictures and with emotions and feelings. Really, at this point, you're feeling tragedy at this point, and then the story moves on to absolute unbridled joy. And so that's what I need to show to the listener. And that is another thing that is a small contribution to dealing with the issue of nerves. What's your diet like? Are you healthy? Is your body relaxed? You know, if your body's already quite stressed because you've got a bad diet, don't be surprised if it goes into overdrive when a little bit of adrenaline cuts in. So your body needs to be ticking over really nice and calmly. Look at your diet. I'm going to do a podcast on my diet. Are you sleeping enough? I know if you're a bit stressed, it's difficult to sleep. Are you meditating? Are you getting moments of stillness, moments of calm in your life? What's your fitness like? Do you run? Do you play tennis? Do you swim? Is your body in good shape? What about your alcohol consumption? Coffee? All of these things go to putting our body in a certain condition when we walk into a stressful situation. Again, I'm going to do a podcast on this, but 1 week before a big concert, I don't drink any alcohol. I don't smoke anyway. I don't drink coffee. And I eat practically a vegan diet. Practically, I know. That's like being either pregnant or not pregnant. You're either vegan or you're not. No, I go in that direction. Last summer, I played at my favorite festival in Kusatsu in Japan. And it's like this meditation camp for musicians. It's a great concert hall. And you get a wonderful concert with an orchestra every 3 days. I get to play as a soloist every 3 days, and there are chamber concerts and recitals. And lots of time to prepare, and the hotel's in the middle of a woodland, you know, and you wake up in the morning and you hear the wind blowing through the trees, and you get out of bed and you have a cup of, you know, Japanese sencha green tea, and you listen to a motivational talk on YouTube, and you go for a walk in the woods and you do a warm-up, and you eat incredibly healthily and you get a bit of exercise, and And you walk onto the stage like you're walking into your living room. You walk out and you smile at the audience and you feel completely cool. And that's the goal, I think, for all of us. Unfortunately, life isn't always planned out for us like that. So, in order to sum up all of those different things that I've been talking about, it's a good, we have a good parallel with cyclists. I've been quite interested in road racing, cycling at certain parts of my life. Those guys, they're shaving off grams, 1 gram of weight here on the gear, 1 gram of weight on the seat here. And they're all of these tiny little amounts of weight that go up to making their bike a little bit lighter, which might not seem to make much difference in a day, but over the course of a year, it might help their fitness. It might gain them a few seconds here or there. And that's the approach we need to take to combating nerves or stage fright. You know, none of the things that I've talked about so far will in itself probably be the silver bullet, as they say, the thing that's going to make the difference to you. But the combination of looking after your sleep, what's your diet like, working on your basic technique, relaxation therapies, having a plan, understanding your narrative, your storyline, looking at your fitness. All of these things are the small contributing factors that will add up to making the difference the next time you go to perform. Now, at this point, I feel I have to step out of the discussion on nerves. I think this is a good point to end the chat. There are other, shall we say, medicinal processes for dealing with adrenaline. And I don't want to go into that right now, and I'll tell you why. Because for 99% of you, everything up to this point is what's going to make the biggest difference. If you don't have all of that under control, nothing's going to help you. And when I talk to students, one-to-one on a personal basis, I very often say, come back when you've got all of those things sorted out, and then we'll talk again. And you know, it almost never happens. As with everything, these are all very, very personal based. And from this point on, anything else that you try beyond what we've discussed up to this point is done on a purely individual basis. And like I say, I don't think you're going to need any more than what we've got here already. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. If there are any issues that you found particularly interesting, don't forget to contact me, and always go to ianbousfield.com for lots more interesting stuff.